Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing The Banshees of Inisherin. This is directed by Martin McDonagh. McDonagh, of course, collaborating with Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson for the second time after In Bruges, which came out in 2008. And Colin Farrell, as we all remember, at least I remember when I was younger, he started out as this like rugged Irish actor, and he was kind of like a heartthrob in Hollywood. But as he's aged, his career has taken a path that maybe I didn't expect initially. He's learned to, I think, really specialize in a specific type of person. I think he plays very simple men very well with a lot of really great nuance. It's like he can find those beats of humor really well, and he can be really pathetic, and yet he's adorable somehow when he's being pathetic, and when he's tragic, he can also be quite gentle. And I really think it was McDonagh who saw that in him somehow. It was like he unlocked some sort of level that gave us this amazing second act to Farrell's career. So I have to thank him for that, but also, you just got to thank him for finding this amazing duo, in Farrell and Gleeson. They're like, I don't know, like a perfect rom-com team or something like that. Just instant, brilliant chemistry in Bruges. And then this feels like, The Banshees of Inisherin feels like kind of like a part two. It's like the second half of that relationship between the two of them. And obviously, the older that we get, the more that relationships mature. Times get darker, and of course, life grows sadder and more lonely, and we begin to reflect on our lives the older that we get. So yeah, I don't know, I look at In Bruges almost like On the Town, 1948, and then I look at this film almost like It's Always Fair Weather, 1955. If you know your film history, then that will make sense to you. This film is really about facing age and facing death head on, and I think, just shooting it in Ireland, it's the perfect place because it's a very bleak place. There's a lot of land. It's very beautiful, but it is very lonely. It looks cold and muggy, and there's something about the atmosphere of it. It's like you can almost feel your joints aching as if you were there. And the premise is very simple. You have Gleeson and Farrell, and they play two very good friends. They've been friends for many, many years, and they live on this very lonely island, Inisherin, and it's a place where nothing really happens. Everything is pretty much the same from day to day. And the war is going on in the distance, though it doesn't really matter necessarily what's going on in the war. We don't know what they're fighting about, but it's just the idea of death being this imminent thing. And even Colin Farrell says, he can, see in the distance that there's a lot of calamity, and he's like, good luck to those people. I don't know what they're fighting about, but good luck to them. But yes, they go to the pub every day at 2 o'clock and they talk. And one day, Gleeson decides he doesn't want to go to the pub. And so naturally, Farrell is asking why. Why don't you want to hang out with me? And Gleeson just responds, I just don't like you anymore. And of course, you're thinking, well, why don't you like him anymore? And it's like, oh, I don't know. He just doesn't want to talk to him. He would rather reflect, and he'd rather think and create. He's somebody who's, clearly somebody that's creative. Maybe he wants to wallow in sorrow. I really don't know, but he wants to exist on his own terms, and he wants to not waste his time talking about mindless things with somebody that he sees as maybe simple-minded or not having much to say. That's really it. It's very simple, and like I said, it becomes this very interesting fable about facing, knowing that your time is going to be up soon, and how that affects what you do with the rest of the time that you have at present. What I really like about these characters is that a lot of them are very simple. It's just these little pleasures that they look forward to each day, and it gets them through, and that's all that they really need. But it's that idea of we all live and we have these little simple pleasures that we chip at every single day of our lives, and after a while it kind of becomes monotonous. And maybe at a certain point, you don't even see it coming. You just hit a wall and you realize that these simple pleasures are eating away at you, and you start feeling anxiety. And it's like, what is that? Again, it's just the benefits of knowing that we're going to die as humans. It changes the way we experience the present. There's a very hard, grisly center to this film. And if you've seen the director's previous work, that's probably not a surprise. But it's like you have, this character, the Brendan Gleeson character. And, like I said, he's creative. He's a musician. He loves to play music and write music. And yet he is threatening his ex-best friend with self-mutilation if he chooses not to leave him in peace. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, if you want to be left alone to play your music, how are you going to do that without fingers? That is the obvious question to ask, I think, but that ends up becoming a very depressing key to the film, I think. It's the complicated things that we do as human beings. It's the fusses that we make over each other, the fusses that we make over ourselves, and to achieve what? Like some sort of strange, comfortable numbness of sorts. And that is this really strange contradiction in the human condition, in the human spirit, that maybe I'll never fully understand. Because this is McDonough, there are a lot of tragic elements to the film, but it's heightened with a lot of comedy. You will laugh a lot in this movie, or at least I did, and when I was in the theater, certainly throughout the film, people were constantly laughing. It has that kind of entertainment quality to it. But I did often find the attempts at tragic comedy lacking a little bit of depth and maybe a little bit of that rawness. And I do think this is something that McDonough is capable of. He's capable of pushing himself to certain areas, and I think he's certainly capable of pushing his characters there as well. And though the characters are very entertaining for me, as I said, they can be just a little bit schematic at times. And a lot of their quirks and everything, it's like sometimes they feel a little bit forced and like they're not quite growing naturally. And I will say, I don't feel it necessarily with this film, but a lot of his past films really run into that issue. And I find myself constantly saying things like, this feels a little bit like second-rate Tarantino, second-rate Guy Ritchie, or kind of second-rate Coen Brothers vibe. I had that problem with In Bruges for sure, and I certainly have that problem with Three Billboards of Ebbing, Missouri, a film that I did not care for very much. But this particular film, I think is way more fully formed, and it's certainly braver than those other films as well. It is his most successful fable and the one I was moved the most by, because it is finding, like I said, a really nice blend of the bleakness and that harshness that is slicing through it. But also, I think it's balanced with, again, like that humor. And a lot of the humor is just naturally in the Irish accents. It's such a wonderful accent. And a lot of that is what keeps the film from feeling a little bit too monotonous and too heavy, I think. It's like, sure, a lot of these characters are, or I should say, it is Ireland. So naturally people are, drinking all the time. People are sad and lonely. And yet the accents just feels like they contradict that. They have like this sing-songy quality, very positive, those upward inflections. It's really wonderful. And again, amidst that undercurrent of all this, like this heaviness and this brooding feeling, I don't know, I think it wonderfully frames the material. But it is the performances here that I think really give the film its palpability. And I think without really great performances, this film could have felt a little bit stale. I think, Farrell obviously is wonderful, as I said, and I think this is one of his better performances. He's just impossible, I think, not to love here as a main character. And Gleeson here is kind of surprising just because his character is different. I mean, just the feel of him is quite different from the performance that he did in Bruges. He's certainly aged and wise as ever, but there is a hardness and a roughness to this character. But I've always gotten kind of a soft, humorous gentility from him just as a man, and you can feel that. And yes, maybe it is because of the character he played in Bruges, that's just in my mind, but that twinkle in the eye is certainly here. I can still see shades of it. And a lot of just the ensemble cast is really, really good here too. I think one of my favorite performances in the whole film is by Kerry Condon. And she's playing Colin Farrell's sister in the film. And I think she's just this wonderful moral center of the film, but also just a strong presence in the film. And, she's the one character here who really does think about things, I think, other than Brendan Gleeson's character. And she wants to make a life that is better for herself. And I really think she's a treasure. And Barry Keoghan is another one. I never know if I'm saying his name right, but he's an actor that I think is just so, so, so incredibly talented. Obviously a very eccentric type of actor, offbeat, and just because of the way his face looks, he's destined to play very quirky type of roles. But it's the authenticity that he brings to a lot of that character work that I think is so fresh and interesting. He can take characters that normally you could see as very stereotypical or very compartmentalized, and he brings a lot of depth to them. He arrives at the same place of emptiness, as sadness as any of the other characters, and I think there's just a real honesty, again, to his performance quality that makes that really fully dimensional. He has a scene here that is very, very moving to me, and I think a lot of it is just because he kind of just trusts in the character, trusts in the body language and the demeanor, whatever it is that he's created, and he's fully living in it. And he finds a very strange, tone of humor, but also, like I said, painful loneliness. I do feel like a lot of the humor in the film, and there is a lot of it, and a lot of the symbols here do get a little bit ham-fisted. And it's not like I'm saying it's going way over the top, but it's just a little bit too forced for my taste. The characterizations, the quirks, not always quite landing. I do think it is the actors here that are elevating the material for sure. Like that character, he's somebody that is, a very obvious sort of device, and it's like we know that he's going to be unexpectedly tragic in the end of it. It's a very obvious archetype. There's nothing particularly interesting or original about it, and yet it's his acting, I think that keeps it from feeling stale, from feeling boring. You do have other characters or other archetypes, like the old woman, and she is, providing the prophecy for us, and that is an archetype that I do think could have been handled maybe just a little bit better. I've seen it handled better, even just this year I've seen it handled better. And there are just things like that, the ominousness and, just bits of the humor that do feel just a little bit tacked on or a little bit forced, rather than just existing authentically in the world. And I do think it keeps their pain from becoming more palpable, at least in my eyes. For me, I think the most interesting stuff is those little things. It's like the idea of being nice. They talk constantly in this movie about what it means to be nice, just a nice guy, how much of a virtue it is to be kind. But it's what we place value on. It's like, do we place value more on kindness, or do we place more value on imagination and talent and sensationalism? And it's those questions, and obviously our priorities and our choices, the peculiarities of our choices, that I think I wish could have been probed just a little bit more, with maybe just a little bit less self-awareness to it. But I do think just, the friendship at the center of this film is really kind of a powerful thing. And I think it becomes more powerful after you leave the theater. It does feel so real. That's one of the most authentic things about it. Because, again, you have these two people and it's like they're dancing around this major issue, and yet they really don't arrive at anything. And yeah, that is very palpable, something that I think a lot of people can relate to. Two characters who have been friends for so long, and clearly there's a ton they don't understand about each other. It's the idea of knowing somebody and trusting somebody, and knowing that, they could leave you at any time, and knowing that, they're constantly changing and they're constantly thinking, and a lot of that is obviously outside of you, but none of them are very healthy revelations. It's a lot of chaos. And yet in the end, they are still not out of each other's lives. It's like they are still standing there just broken and bitter and angry and annoyed with each other and alone. And I don't know, there's just a lot of wonderful heaviness there, and yet it's also kind of funny at the same time. Just stuff like that I think is really beautiful. It's the aching, very simple moments of silence that I think are the most powerful. And I guess I wanted this film to maybe break my heart just a little bit more, because it did feel just a little bit too on the surface for me. The sentiment is just a little bit too thick, but I am saying all of this while also saying it's very entertaining at the same time. I do think the film has a solid handle on its core themes and obviously its characters and the mood, but there are certain times that I just feel things are a little bit off. As an example, I'm not sure how I feel about using the war as the backdrop for these characters, as this like burden that is weighing on them. And it's obviously a device that is connecting our characters to that existential dread. And in a very broad, very overarching sense, it works, because it's like, all you need are just like the booms in the distance. That impending doom is coming. We don't really need to know why they're fighting. We just need to know that they are fighting. And obviously our characters don't care about it, but just as an emotional core, emotional center, it just feels a little bit flimsy as a framing device. I want just a little bit firmer legs on some of the metaphors, and I want some of the ideas and the emotions, just like I mentioned with the war backdrop, to kind of click in place a little bit more, be on the same wavelength fully. I think that's when you get in some sort of special zone, and that's where I really want McDonagh to arrive at a certain point. But I think we are really, we're getting there. I think this is a great step in the right direction. I was pleasantly surprised by this film, and yeah, I think this is easily my favorite McDonagh film, and this is an easy recommendation for me. But that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as usual. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below, and if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons, who are wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members, and if you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.